This is the second of a two-part video. If you don't understand what's going on, it's probably because you didn't see part 1, which is linked in the description. As Desmond brought the crown down over Desianna's head, she felt it tug at her hair, pulling it against the bonds of its bun. Desmond had tied her bun so tight that it felt more like a rock than hair, and even still it only barely hid itself below the rim of the crown. Nothing about this was pleasant. Her scalp strained from the tension, and her head chafed from the touch of the metal. "There," he said, putting his hands on both her temples and pointing her head at the mirror. Desianna had been avoiding the mirror, in part because of the bun, but also because of the rest of her outfit. Desmond had found her a long, flowing purple cape fit for a king, as well as a ruffled collar, pantaloons, and so much jewelry and gold that it was hard to tell the difference between her and a large, scaled reptile. She, being a 6-year-old, jumped when she saw this gilded stranger before she could remind herself of Desmond's words on staying calm. If she had been wearing the mask to cover her upturned nose and hazel eyes, she would have never known it was her. That might have been better, because then she could have at least pretended that it was someone else, instead of her own face staring out from the body of an imposter. "Aren't you stunning? So much authority!" Desmond adjusted the crown almost imperceptibly to the left. "I think this suits you, I really do. And this crown, the way it brings out your eyes is so striking. You're so lucky to have something like this, all bought and paid for. It's a rare privilege." "It is," Desianna admitted, watching Desmond's eyes carefully in the mirror to catch the moment he looked away. If he looked away, that meant she would be able to look away as well. "We've worked so hard for this," Desmond said, relishing in his stolen valor as he removed his hands from her temples and put them on her shoulders instead. "You're going to do great." Those last words had an incredible effect on Desianna. She greedily soaked them up in much the same manner as a cactus. Also like a cactus, she would store them for longer than any living thing reasonably should, playing them over and over in her head until the next drizzle of kind words came. That could take anywhere from weeks to months. "You really think so?" she beamed, straightening herself up to her fullest height, chancing a look at her face and quickly reconsidering. "I know so, dear," Desmond said, lightly massaging her shoulders. Desianna needed shoulder massages from time to time because her daily life was so stressful that her shoulders were already about as tense as a 30-year-old's, even though she'd only had a fifth of the time. An exhaustive global census would reveal that she was, by most measures, the world's third most time-efficient shoulder tensor, only beaten out by 2 monks in the Lepeni Mountains who had achieved a state of meditation so complete that their bodies were more comparable to stone than flesh. Perhaps it was the massage, or the easy smile on Desianna's face, but Desianna decided that she was brave enough to prod for another compliment. "I practiced all the time," she said, "even when you weren't looking." When someone says something like all the time, they're almost always wrong. They forget to account for little moments of quiet between wake and sleep, for instance. Desianna was as close to correct as anyone could be. "I know," Desmond lied, because he was unwilling to admit to ignorance or surprise under any circumstance. "Of course you did. What child of mine wouldn't? That's why you're going to go out there and you're going to win." The mention of winning was enough to put Desianna into a half-catatonic state as she fantasized about a crowd cheering her name and a smiling Desmond leaning down to hug her. Tantalizing. Desianna shouldn't have even been allowed into the Higgswood Elementary talent show because she wasn't a student there. Technically, she shouldn't have been allowed into any talent show because she was legally homeschooled. Several of the stricter administrative staff had tried to block her entry, and a lamppost had fallen right in front of Desmond on the walk over, but his money and agility meant that these were trifling matters. Once Desmond realized that Desianna looked a little too happy, he cleared his throat to snap her out of her waking vision.
"We've got a few minutes left," he said, "so why don't you practice your lines?"
Desianna nodded and turned excitedly toward him, glad for any excuse to get away from the mirror. If she had to wear this stuff, she at least didn't want to see it. She pushed her throat forward as far as it would go to deepen her voice and began.
When the arrows came for me, my shield was the first to give itself. 100 or more must have lodged in its wood until the surface was nothing but pulled apart sawdust. The last arrow left it crumbling apart, held together only by a purpose it could no longer fill. So I left it to rest on the ground. When the swords came, I met them with my own. I battled off hundreds, if not thousands, but each left a notch in the steel. By the time I finished with the last, I was left with an empty hilt and a sense of dread. When the spears came, I had nothing left to protect myself. I hid behind trees and rocks and walls. All gave themselves in my stead, and the onslaught remained. Further and further I ran, until one day I found a spear of my own. It was sharp, and it was strong. I threw it as hard as I could toward my attacker, and there were no more spears, nor arrows, nor swords. Only a momentary quiet, and a set of tracks to trace if I ever wanted to find my home. Then came time, and he would brook no substitution. "You have defended yourself valiantly," he said, "but there can be no escape from me." But I had never given myself before, and I wasn't going to now. I was my own to keep. I took up the spear again and ran it through his heart, and now every moment is forever, an infinity of nows, each one stretched and strained. I would do it again.
"You forgot attribution," Desmond said once she had finished. "But you already know where it's from," Desianna said, "so I didn't think I needed it."
"It's part of the speech, so you always need it. Say it so I know you know."
Desianna bit back a disappointed sigh. "The Right of Kings by Lester von Neumann, Chapter 7, page 83.
"Very good," Desmond said, patting her on the back. "I'm sure you'll make me proud."